The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong came when the hyperspace beacon in the Proxima system went silent. Commander Zeth Kara of the Galactic Council's exploration vessel Starweaver had been monitoring long-range communications when the signal simply stopped. Not a gradual fade, not interference from a solar storm, but an abrupt end that left only the cold whisper of cosmic background radiation. Status report. Zeth Kara commanded, his four arms dancing across the control interfaces with practiced efficiency. The bridge of the Starweaver hummed with activity as his crew of various species worked to understand what had happened. Sir, the beacon was transmitting normally until 0347 hours, then complete silence, reported Navigation Officer Yila, a crystalline being whose translucent form flickered with internal light when stressed. No distress signals, no indication of system failure. Zeth Kara's primary eyes narrowed, while his secondary pair scanned the tactical displays. Proxima Centauri had been one of the first systems quarantined after the Great Exile 2 centuries ago. The humans had been banished there along with several other primitive species deemed too dangerous for galactic society. The system had been sealed with quantum interdiction fields and monitored constantly. Could it be equipment failure? Asked Science Officer Mordak, a thick-skinned Grelvani, whose people were known for their analytical minds. Negative, Yila replied, her form brightening with certainty. The beacon was constructed with triple redundancies. The probability of total system failure is less than 0.0001%. Zeth Kara felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. In his 40 years of service to the Galactic Council, he had never encountered a situation like this. The quarantine systems were supposed to be impenetrable. They had been designed by the greatest minds of 17 different species, powered by the energy of Proxima's star itself, and maintained by automated systems that could self-repair for millennia. Set course for the Proxima system, he ordered. Maximum acceleration. Sir, Mordak interjected. Council regulations state that no vessel may approach within 50 light-years of any quarantine system without express authorization from I'm aware of the regulations, Zeth Kara cut him off. But we have a potential breach of a quarantine that contains some of the most dangerous species ever cataloged. The Council will have to understand. The journey to Proxima took 3 standard days at maximum warp. During that time, Zeth Kara reviewed everything in the ship's database about the quarantined species, particularly the humans. The files made for disturbing reading. Humans were classified as a Class 12 aggressive species with unprecedented adaptability and an alarming tendency toward technological innovation. They had been discovered barely a century after achieving spaceflight, already spreading across their local stellar region with a speed that had shocked galactic observers. What made them truly dangerous wasn't just their rapid expansion or their crude, but effective technology. It was their psychology. Humans seemed incapable of accepting limitations. Where other species would adapt to their environment, humans adapted their environment to themselves. Where others would accept their place in the galactic hierarchy, humans questioned everything. During the brief period before their exile, human representatives had caused chaos in council meetings. They had demanded equal representation despite being newcomers. They had questioned fundamental principles of galactic governance that had stood for millennia. They had even suggested that the council's carefully maintained balance of power was corrupt and outdated. But, worst of all, other species had begun to listen to them. The decision to exile humanity had not been taken lightly. It had required a majority vote from all council species, something that had only happened 3 times in galactic history. The humans and their sympathizers had been relocated to the Proxima system along with their basic technology and supplies for a small colony. The system had then been sealed. It was supposed to have been permanent. Now, as the Starweaver dropped out of warp at the edge of what had once been the interdiction field, Zeth Kara stared at his displays in disbelief. Sensors are picking up massive debris fields where the quantum interdictors should be, reported Tactical Officer Kresh, a warrior caste Vorthak, whose people had helped design the original containment systems. Sir, the fields aren't just down. The entire infrastructure has been demolished. Demolished how? Kresh's mandibles clicked nervously. Unknown, sir. The debris patterns suggest some kind of directed energy weapons, but the power levels required would be... He paused, running calculations. Sir, it would take the combined firepower of the entire Council fleet to cause this level of destruction. Zethkara studied the tactical display. The quantum interdiction field had consisted of 847 massive stations positioned throughout the system, each one the size of a small moon, and protected by defensive systems that should have been impregnable. Now they were nothing but twisted metal and cooling plasma. Any signs of ships in the system? Negative on conventional sensors, Yila replied. But, sir, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures near Proxima B. The patterns don't match any known technology. Take us in. Full stealth mode. As they moved deeper into the Proxima system, more anomalies became apparent. Several asteroids showed signs of large-scale mining operations. The debris of what appeared to be massive construction projects drifted in orbital paths that suggested they had once been space habitats. And there were energy readings from Proxima B itself that indicated industrial activity on a scale that seemed impossible for an isolated colony. Sir, Mordak said, his voice tight with concern, I'm detecting artificial gravity wells throughout the system. Someone has been conducting major stellar engineering projects. That's impossible, Zethkara replied automatically. Stellar engineering requires technology that... He stopped. The quarantine species weren't supposed to have access to advanced technology. But humans had always been unpredictable. As they approached Proxima B, the ship's sensors began picking up more detailed information. What they found defied explanation. The planet below was no longer the marginally habitable world that had been selected for the exile. Massive orbital installations surrounded it like a metal shell. The atmosphere had been completely terraformed. And, most shocking of all, energy readings suggested a population in the hundreds of millions. How is this possible? Yila whispered, her crystalline form flickering with confusion. The exile was only 2 centuries ago. Even if they had help from the other quarantine species, this level of development should take millennia. Zethkara was studying the tactical displays when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Multiple contacts appearing on sensors, Kresh announced. 2050, sir. I count over 200 vessels of unknown configuration decloaking around us. On the main display, sleek ships materialized as if they had been hiding in folded space itself. Their design was unlike anything in Council records. Angular, aggressive, with energy signatures that suggested weapons technology far beyond what the quarantine species should have possessed. Incoming transmission, Communications Officer Vex reported. Put it through. The main display flickered, and suddenly, Zethkara found himself looking at a face that made his blood run cold. It was unmistakably human, but there was something different about it. The eyes held a hardness that spoke of centuries of struggle, and there were subtle modifications. Enhanced bone structure, slightly enlarged cranium, skin that seemed to have a faint metallic sheen. Greetings, the human said in perfect galactic standard. I am Admiral Chun of the Terran Dominion. You are trespassing in sovereign Dominion space. Zethkara fought to keep his voice steady. I am Commander Zethkara of the Galactic Council vessel Starweaver. This system is under Council quarantine jurisdiction. Admiral Chin's expression didn't change, but something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Commander, I'm afraid your information is outdated. The Proxima system has been under Terran Dominion control for the past 173 years. The quarantine you speak of was terminated. Terminated? You had no authority to... We had every authority, Chin interrupted. The authority of survival. The authority of adaptation. The authority of strength. He leaned forward slightly. Did you really think you could lock us away and expect us to simply accept our fate? Zethkara's mind raced. This was far worse than a simple containment breach. Somehow, in just 2 centuries, the humans had not only escaped their prison, but had apparently thrived. The technology they were displaying was clearly superior to anything the Council possessed. What happened to the other species? Zethkara asked. The exile included Andromedans, cetaceans, and several others. They chose to join us, Chen replied simply. It turns out that when you dump all the problem children of the galaxy in one system, they tend to work together rather well. We learn much from each other. This is impossible. Your technology, your population levels, your industrial capacity, none of this could have been achieved in 2 centuries. Chen's smile was cold. You exiled us because we thought differently, Commander. Because we refused to accept limitations. Did you really think exile would change that? If anything, it focused our efforts. Zethkara noticed movement on the tactical display. More ships were appearing, not just around his vessel, but throughout the system. The readings were staggering. He was looking at what appeared to be a fully developed stellar navy with hundreds of ships, some of them massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Council fleet. I need to report this to the Council, Zethkara said. Of course you do, Chen agreed. In fact, we're counting on it. You see, Commander, we've been preparing for this moment for a very long time. We've been waiting for the Council to send someone to check on their little prison. Waiting? Why? Because it's time for the quarantine to end. It's time for the Terran Dominion to reclaim its rightful place in galactic affairs. Chen's expression hardened, and it's time for the Council to answer for what they did to us. Alarms suddenly blared across the Starweaver S-bridge as new contacts appeared on sensors. These weren't ships. They were moving too fast and too small. Some kind of probes or missiles. Sir, Kresh reported, his voice tight with fear. I'm detecting weapons locked from multiple Dominion vessels. They're targeting our hyperdrive and communication systems. You're not in danger, Commander, Chen said. At least, not immediate danger. But you're not leaving this system until we've had a proper conversation. You see, you're going to help us send a message to the Galactic Council. Zethkara felt his stomach drop. What kind of message? The kind that makes it clear that humanity is coming home, Chen replied. And we're not asking for permission. Before Zethkara could respond, his ship was surrounded by a shimmering energy field. According to his instruments, they were now trapped in some kind of tractor beam system that he had never seen before. Don't be alarmed, Chen continued. Your ship and crew are perfectly safe. But you're going to be our guest for a while. We have a lot to catch up on, and there's some things you need to see before you return to Council space. The Council will do exactly what they've always done, Chen interrupted. They'll debate. They'll form committees. They'll try to find a diplomatic solution to a problem they created. But this time, they're not dealing with a primitive species asking for a seat at their table. They're dealing with the Terran Dominion, and we've learned a great deal about power in the past 2 centuries. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkara staring at a blank screen. Around his ship, the Dominion fleet maintained their positions, clearly waiting for orders. Sir, Mordak said quietly, what do we do? Zethkara looked at the tactical display, showing hundreds of advanced ships surrounding his vessel. Whatever had happened in this system over the past 2 centuries, it had produced something that the Council had never prepared for. They had exiled humanity to contain a problem, but instead, they had created something far more dangerous. We learn, he said finally. We listen, and we pray to whatever gods are listening that we can find a way to prevent a war that could tear the galaxy apart. On the surface of Proxima B, Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the Terran Dominion's primary military installation. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the sprawling cities that had grown up around the planet's surface. Millions of humans and their allies live there now, all of them descendants of the exiles who had been cast out by the Council 2 centuries ago. Sir, his aide, Commander Sarah Mitchell, approached with a datapad. The Council ship has been secured. What are your orders? Chen studied the information on the pad. The Starweaver was a standard Council exploration vessel, nothing particularly impressive by Dominion standards. But its crew represented the first contact with the outside galaxy since the exile. Prepare the guest quarters, he said. Make sure our visitors are comfortable. They're going to be here for a while. How long, sir? Chun turned to look at a massive holographic display that showed the current deployment of the Dominion fleet. Hundreds of ships were positioned throughout the Proxima system and beyond. For decades, they had been preparing for this moment. Long enough to see what we've built here, he said. Long enough to understand that the exile didn't break us, it made us stronger. And long enough for us to prepare our return to the galaxy. Mitchell nodded. Shall I begin preparing the expeditionary forces? Not yet, Chin replied. First, we educate our guests. Let them see what exile taught us. Let them understand what the Dominion has become. Then, we give them a choice. What choice, sir? Chin's smile was grim. The same choice the Council gave us 2 centuries ago. Accept our terms or face the consequences. As night fell over the Dominion's capital city, Chin stood watching the lights of a civilization that had grown from the ashes of exile. The Council had tried to contain humanity's dangerous spirit by isolating them. Instead, they had given that spirit time to evolve, to adapt, and to grow stronger. Soon, it would be time to show the galaxy what that spirit had become. The Starweaver hung in space, surrounded by ships that represented technology and power that shouldn't have been possible. But humanity had never accepted the word impossible. They had been exiled for being different, for refusing to conform to the galaxy's established order. Now they were coming back, and they were bringing with them everything they had learned in their centuries of isolation. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes, when you cage a dangerous animal, you don't domesticate it. You make it stronger. Deep in the ship's databases, automated systems began compiling reports that would eventually make their way back to the Council. But those reports would tell only part of the story. They would describe the technology, the ships, the population figures. They wouldn't capture the most important thing of all. They wouldn't convey the burning determination in human eyes, the absolute certainty that exile was ending and that humanity was coming home. Whether the galaxy was ready or not, Commander Zethkara had been aboard Dominion vessels for 3 days now, and everything he had seen challenged his understanding of what was possible. The ship that had taken him from the Starweaver was unlike anything in Council archives. Its corridors were spacious enough for multiple species, its technology was seamlessly integrated, and, most disturbing of all, its crew worked with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. The artificial gravity system alone represents a breakthrough that our scientists said would take millennia to achieve, Mordak whispered as they were escorted through another section of the massive ship. And look at their hull materials. I've never seen anything like it. Their escort, a tall woman with the enhanced features that seemed common among Dominion humans, smiled at the comment. Commander Therese, she had introduced herself. We call it metamaterial synthesis. One of our earlier developments. Earlier, Zethkara asked, how many technological advances have you made? We stopped counting after the first 1,000, Torres replied casually. When you're cut off from galactic trade and technology, you either innovate or die. We chose to innovate. They entered what Torres called the Education Center, a vast chamber filled with holographic displays, interactive exhibits, and groups of beings studying together. What struck Zethkara immediately was the diversity. Humans worked alongside the crystalline beings he recognized as cetaceans, the metallic forms of Andromedans, and several species he didn't recognize at all. The unknown species, Torres explained, noticing his confusion. Refugees who found their way to our system over the decades. The Council's quarantine wasn't as perfect as they thought. Ships slip through sometimes, damaged vessels, survivors of various conflicts, explorers who got lost. We welcome them all. Why? Yila asked. Why take in more exiles? Torres stopped walking and turned to face them. Because we learned something important in our exile, something the Council never understood. Diversity isn't a problem to be managed. It's a resource to be treasured. Every species thinks differently, has different insights, different capabilities. When you bring them together and let them collaborate freely, she gestured at the chamber around them. Magic happens. They watched as a group of young beings, human, cetacean, and several others, worked together on what appeared to be a complex engineering project. Their communication was fluid, seamless, as if they had grown up together. They have, Torres confirmed when Zethkara mentioned this. Mixed species families have been common here for generations. These children don't see species differences as barriers. To them, it's just normal. Mordak was studying the engineering project the youngsters were working on. That's a quantum resonance chamber, he said in amazement. I recognize the basic principles, but their design is decades ahead of anything the Council has developed. 15-year-olds, Torres said proudly, working on their advanced placement project. They'll probably have it perfected by next month. This is impossible, Zethkara muttered. Technological advancement doesn't work this way. It takes time, resources, massive research institutions. It takes those things when you're working within the Council's framework, Torres corrected. When you're trying to preserve the status quo, maintain the balance between competing interests, avoid disrupting existing power structures. We didn't have those constraints. She led them to another section where they could observe older students and researchers at work. The projects here were even more advanced. What appeared to be experiments in dimensional manipulation, stellar engineering on a massive scale, and biotechnology that made Zethkara's skin crawl. The biotechnology was necessary, Torres explained, noticing his discomfort. When you're building a civilization from scratch with limited genetic diversity, you have to get creative. The modifications you see aren't just cosmetic. They represent adaptation to different environments, enhanced capabilities, extended lifespans. Extended how much? Yila asked. The first generation of exiles are still alive, Torres replied. They're approaching their 3rd century, and our projections suggest they'll see their 5th or 6th. Their minds remain sharp, their bodies strong. Death, for us, has become more of a choice than an inevitability. They moved through the facility, each new section revealing capabilities that seemed more impossible than the last. Material science that could produce substances harder than diamond and lighter than aluminum. Energy systems that could tap directly into quantum fluctuations. Transportation technology that could move objects instantly across vast distances. How? Zethkara finally asked, how did you develop all this in just 2 centuries? Torres paused at an observation deck that looked out over the Dominion's capital city. The view was breathtaking, towering spires that reached into the clouds, transport systems that moved people and goods with perfect efficiency, and, in the distance, the massive orbital elevators that connected the surface to the ring of space stations surrounding the planet. Necessity, she said simply, and freedom. Freedom? Freedom from the Council's regulations about what research could be conducted. Freedom from ethical committees that spent decades debating whether an experiment was appropriate. Freedom from the political considerations that force scientists to work in isolation from each other. Torres's voice carried a note of bitterness. Do you know how many breakthrough technologies the Council suppressed over the millennia? How many innovations were shelved because they might disrupt the existing order? The Council maintains stability, Zethkara protested. Without proper oversight, dangerous research could what? Destroy the galaxy? End civilization as we know it. Torres laughed, but there was no humor in it. Commander, we've had 2 centuries to think about the Council's definition of dangerous research. And we've concluded that the most dangerous thing of all is stagnation. She pointed to a section of the city where construction seemed to be ongoing. See that district? It's being rebuilt using our latest architectural theories. The buildings there will adapt to changing needs, grow, and reshape themselves as required. The materials will become stronger over time, not weaker. The energy systems will actually improve with age. And if something goes wrong, then we fix it. We learn from it. We make it better. Torres turned to face them. That's what you never understood about humanity, about any of the species you exiled. We don't fear change. We embrace it. They spent the next several hours touring different sections of the city. Each area specialized in different types of research and development. The biotechnology district was working on enhanced neural interfaces and genetic optimization. The material science quarter was developing substances that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The energy research zone was experimenting with tapping the vacuum energy of space itself. But what impressed Zethkara most wasn't the technology, it was the attitude. Every being they met, regardless of species, shared the same sense of purpose, the same drive to push boundaries and explore possibilities. There was none of the careful bureaucracy that characterized council research, none of the political maneuvering or resource competition. How do you coordinate it all? Mordak asked as they observed a massive project involving hundreds of researchers from dozens of species. How do you prevent conflicts over resources, priority disputes, territorial arguments? Simple, Torres replied. We eliminated scarcity. Eliminated it? How? Matter conversion technology. Energy extraction from quantum foam. Automated manufacturing that can produce anything we need from base elements. Torres gestured at the bustling activity around them. When everyone has access to unlimited resources, there's no need to fight over them. When every idea can be tested without taking resources away from someone else's project, cooperation becomes natural. As they walked through the research districts, Zethkara began to understand something that chilled him. The Dominion hadn't just advanced technologically. They had fundamentally reimagined how civilization could work. They had solved problems that the Council considered unsolvable, eliminated conflicts that galactic society had accepted as inevitable. You're planning to export this, he said suddenly. This isn't just about escaping exile. You want to change the entire galaxy. Torres nodded. The exile taught us that the Council's way isn't the only way. It isn't even a good way. For millennia, galactic civilization has been held back by artificial limitations, by the need to maintain balance between competing factions, by the fear of change. Those limitations exist for good reasons, Zethkara protested. The balance of power prevents wars, maintains peace, maintains stagnation, Torres corrected. Commander, when was the last time the Council approved a truly revolutionary technology? When did they last allow a fundamental change to how galactic society operates? Zethkara thought about it and realized he couldn't answer. The Council prized stability above all else. Revolutionary changes were seen as threats to the carefully maintained equilibrium between species and factions. The peace you're so proud of is the peace of the grave, Torres continued. No wars, no conflicts, no progress, no growth. Just endless repetition of the same patterns, the same mistakes, the same limitations. They returned to the ship as Proxima's sun was setting. From orbit, the planet looked like a jewel, its cities glowing with clean energy, its orbital installations bustling with activity. According to the briefings Torres had provided, the Dominion controlled not just Proxima b, but the entire system, with major installations throughout the asteroid belt and even stations orbiting Proxima's distant companion stars. Population? Zethkara asked as they watched the planet turn below them. 700 million across the entire system, Torres replied, growing by about 10 million per year. We'll reach 1 billion within the decade. The numbers were staggering. The original exile had included perhaps 100,000 individuals from all species combined. In 2 centuries, they had built a civilization that rivaled the Council worlds in size and completely surpassed them in technology. Admiral Chun would like to meet with you this evening, Torres informed them. There are some things he wants to show you personally. They were escorted to what Torres called the archive, a vast chamber deep within the ship that contained what appeared to be the complete history of the Dominion. Holographic displays showed the early years of exile, the struggles to establish basic survival, the gradual development of their technological capabilities. Admiral Chun was waiting for them, standing before a display that showed the construction of the first orbital habitats. He looked older than in their previous meeting, Zethkara realized, but not in the way that Council species aged. There was a depth to his features, a sense of accumulated wisdom and experience that seemed almost timeless. Commander, Chun greeted him. I trust your tour has been enlightening. Overwhelming, Zefkara admitted. I'm still trying to understand how all of this is possible. Let me show you, Chen said, activating a new holographic display. This is the story the Council never bothered to learn. The story of what happens when you abandon people and expect them to simply disappear. The display showed the early days of exile in stark detail. The cramped transport ships carrying the exiles to Proxima. The marginal conditions on the planet's surface. The struggle to establish basic infrastructure with limited resources and no outside support. The first decade was about survival, Chen explained. Just staying alive in a hostile environment with no help from the outside. 18,000 humans, 6,000 cetaceans, 4,000 Andromedans, and 12,000 members of various other species. All of us dumped here because we asked inconvenient questions or refused to accept our assigned roles in the galactic hierarchy. The display shifted to show the early settlements, crude, but functional structures built from local materials. Zefkara could see the desperation in the faces of the exiles, the determination that drove them to keep building despite the overwhelming odds. The second decade was about cooperation, Chen continued. Learning to work together, combining our different capabilities, sharing our knowledge and technologies. The Council had assumed we would fragment into competing factions, fighting over limited resources. Instead, we did the opposite. The holographic scenes showed mixed species work crews, shared research projects, the gradual development of the technologies that would eventually become the foundation of Dominion civilization. The third decade was about innovation, Chen said. Once we had basic survival secured and cooperation established, we began to push boundaries. We had to. The Council's technology was designed for their society, their values, their limitations. It wasn't suited to what we were trying to build. Zefkara watched as the display showed the first breakthrough technologies, improved energy systems, advanced materials, biotechnological enhancements that allowed the exiles to adapt to their new environment. And the next 17 decades? He asked. Chen smiled grimly. The next 17 decades were about becoming something the Council never imagined. Something they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. The display showed the explosive growth that followed. The expansion beyond the planet's surface, the construction of massive space habitats, the development of technologies that seemed to violate known physical laws. But this, Chen said, highlighting a particular section of the timeline, this is what I really wanted to show you. The scene that appeared made Zefkara's blood freeze. It showed Dominion ships, unmistakably advanced but clearly recognizable, moving through what appeared to be Council space. Not attacking, not destroying, but observing, studying, learning. You've been watching us, Zefkara whispered. For the past 50 years, Chen confirmed. Cloaked ships, undetectable probes, intelligence networks. We know everything about the Council, about galactic society, about the problems you face, and the limitations you accept. That's impossible. Our security systems are designed to detect threats using technology you understand, Chen interrupted. They're not equipped to identify surveillance systems based on principles your scientists haven't discovered yet. Mordak was studying the display with growing alarm. How many ships? How much surveillance? Enough, Chen replied. Enough to know that galactic civilization is stagnating. Enough to know that the Council's careful balance is collapsing under its own weight. Enough to know that revolution is inevitable. Revolution. Yila's crystalline form flickered with distress. You're planning to attack the Council? Chen's expression softened slightly. Attack? No. We're not interested in conquest or domination. We're interested in liberation. Liberation from what? From the systems that have held galactic civilization in stasis for millennia. From the artificial limitations that prevent species from reaching their full potential. From the fear of change that has made the galaxy a prisoner of its own past. He activated another display, this one showing current conditions throughout Council space. The images were disturbing: stagnant economies, declining birth rates, increasing tensions between species, a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the status quo. Your own reports document the problems, Chen noted. rising unemployment as automation eliminates jobs, but no new opportunities are created. Political paralysis as the council becomes increasingly unable to address fundamental issues. Brain drain as the most innovative minds seek opportunities elsewhere. These are manageable challenges, Zethkara protested. The council has faced difficulties before. The council has never faced anything like this, Chen interrupted. Because the council has never faced a viable alternative to its way of doing things. Until now, the display shifted again, showing projections of what galactic civilization could become. Unlimited energy, abundant resources, radical life extension, technologies that seemed like magic, opportunities for every being to reach their full potential regardless of species or origin. This is what we're offering, Chun said. Not conquest, not domination, partnership, the chance to be part of something greater than the sum of its parts. And if the council refuses? Chen's smile was cold. Then, they'll discover that exile taught us more than just how to survive. It taught us how to fight. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Dominion wasn't just offering an alternative to council civilization. They were prepared to impose it by force if necessary. How long do we have? Zethkara asked finally. That depends on the council's response, Chen replied. We're prepared to begin immediately, but we'd prefer to proceed peacefully. Change is inevitable, Commander. The only question is whether it comes through cooperation or through conflict. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Zethkara's mind reeled with everything he had learned. The Dominion represented a fundamental challenge to everything the Council stood for, everything galactic civilization had built over millennia. But more troubling was the growing suspicion that they might be right. The exile had been intended to eliminate a problem. Instead, it had created something far more dangerous, a functioning alternative to the Council's way of life. And if what Shin claimed was true, if galactic civilization really was stagnating under the weight of its own limitations, then the Dominion offered something the Council could never provide. Hope for the future. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the price that hope might demand. The fourth day of Commander Zethkara's captivity began with an alarm that shouldn't have been possible. His quarters aboard the Dominion ship were comfortable, equipped with all the necessities for his species, but they were also very clearly a prison. The walls contained force fields that prevented escape, the communications were monitored, and guards were posted outside at all times. So when his personal datapad began receiving an emergency transmission from Council space, he knew immediately that the Dominion wanted him to see it. Commander, came the voice of High Counselor Veltar, leader of the Council's governing body. If you are receiving this, then our worst fears have been confirmed. 2 hours ago, we lost contact with the defense platforms guarding the Sirius system. Zethkara felt his blood chill. Sirius was one of the Council's most heavily fortified systems, home to 3 different Council species and protected by some of the most advanced defensive technology in the galaxy. Long-range sensors detected massive energy discharges consistent with directed weapons fire, Veltar continued. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found. The High Counselor's voice wavered. They found nothing. The platforms, the automated defense systems, even the monitoring stations, all gone. Completely destroyed. The transmission included tactical data that made no sense. The Sirius Defense Network had included over 400 platforms, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. They had been positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, powered by the energy of Sirius itself, and controlled by AI systems that could react faster than any organic mind. All of it had been destroyed in less than 20 minutes. We are implementing emergency protocols across all Council systems, Veltar's message concluded. All military forces are being placed on high alert. Commander, if you are still alive, you must find a way to transmit intelligence about what you have discovered. The Council needs to know what we're facing. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkara staring at his datapad in shock. The Sirius attack had happened while he was touring Dominion research facilities. While he was being shown their technological achievements, Their ships have been destroying one of the Council's most important defense networks. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Zethkara opened it to find Admiral Chun waiting in the corridor, flanked by 2 guards. "I trust you received the transmission," Chun said without preamble. "You did this," Zethkara accused. "You attacked Sirius." "We removed an obstacle," Chun corrected. The Sirius defense network was designed to prevent ships from leaving Council space without authorization. It was part of the system used to maintain the quarantine that imprisoned us for 2 centuries. Those platforms protected 3 inhabited worlds. "The platforms are gone," Chun replied calmly. "The worlds are unharmed. We're not interested in causing unnecessary casualties, Commander. We're interested in removing the tools of oppression." Chun gestured for Zethkara to follow him. "Kulme, it's time you saw how we removed those obstacles." They walked through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. The ship around them was clearly at battle stations, though none of the crew seemed particularly tense or concerned. They moved with the confidence of beings who knew they held overwhelming advantage. "How many ships did you use?" Zethkara asked as they entered what appeared to be a tactical command center. "1," Chun replied simply. "One ship destroyed the entire Sirius defense network." Zethkara couldn't hide his disbelief. "That's impossible. Even our most advanced dreadnoughts couldn't penetrate the defensive matrix, couldn't survive the concentrated firepower, couldn't move fast enough to avoid being destroyed," Chun finished. "All true for ships using Council technology." The tactical center displayed a 3-dimensional map of local space, showing the positions of hundreds of Dominion vessels. But what caught Zethkara's attention was a single ship designation that pulsed with special significance: TDS Retribution. "The Retribution is our first fully realized warship," Chun explained. "Built using technologies developed specifically for military applications. Would you like to see it in action?" Before Zethkara could respond, the display shifted to show real-time sensor data from another system. This was the Vega system, another heavily fortified Council stronghold. As they watched, a single contact appeared on the sensors, something that seemed to materialize out of empty space. "Dimensional phasing," Chun explained. "The ship exists in normal space, but can shift partially into higher dimensions to avoid detection and weapons fire. From your sensor's perspective, it simply doesn't exist until we choose to make it visible." The contact on the display began moving toward the Vega defense platforms. Immediately, the entire defensive network came alive. Hundreds of automated weapons began firing, filling space with energy beams, particle bursts, and guided missiles. The concentration of firepower was incredible, enough to destroy entire fleets. None of it touched the Retribution. "Conventional weapons can't affect a ship that's phased into higher dimensions," Chun noted. "And our defensive systems can neutralize anything that operates on principles we understand." As they watched, the Retribution began its attack. But instead of energy weapons or missiles, it deployed something else entirely: points of absolute darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. "Singularity weapons," Chun explained. "Artificial black holes, carefully controlled and targeted. They don't just destroy targets, they unmake them. Matter, energy, even the space-time continuum itself gets pulled into the event horizon and ceases to exist." The defense platforms began disappearing one by one, not exploding, but simply vanishing as the singularities consumed them. Within minutes, the entire Vega defense network was gone. "And now," Chun said, "we demonstrate what happens to those who refuse to accept the new reality." The display shifted again, this time showing a live transmission from the Vega system. Zethkara recognized the face on the screen: Governor Thexmar of Vega Prime, one of the Council's most vocal supporters of the quarantine policies. "This is an outrage," Thexmar was shouting at someone off-screen. "The Council will not negotiate with terrorists. We will never surrender to..." His transmission cut off as the Retribution came into visual range of Vega Prime. The ship was massive, easily the size of a small moon. and its hull seemed to be made of the same dark material as the Singularity weapons. It didn't reflect light so much as seemed to absorb it, creating a vessel that looked like a piece of space itself had been carved into ship form. "Governor," came a voice from the Retribution, calm, professional, utterly confident. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Dominion ship Retribution. Your defense network has been neutralized. Your system is now under Dominion control. You have 1 hour to prepare for the arrival of our diplomatic team." "Never," Thexmar responded. The Council," Captain Morrison interrupted, "is in no position to help you. In the past 6 hours, we have neutralized the defense networks of 8 Council systems. We now control the primary hyperspace routes between the core worlds and the Outer Rim. Your reinforcements are not coming." Zethkara stared at the display in horror. 8 systems? The Dominion had attacked 8 Council systems simultaneously? The coordination required for such an operation was staggering. "How?" he whispered. 2 centuries of preparation," Chen replied. "We've had a long time to study Council defenses, to understand their weaknesses, to develop counters for their technologies. What you're seeing isn't an invasion. It's a surgical removal of the tools the Council uses to maintain control." The transmission from Vega continued as Governor Thexmar realized the hopelessness of his situation. The Retribution hung in space above his world like a dark moon, its presence a stark reminder of the Dominion's overwhelming technological superiority. "What do you want?" Thexmar finally asked. "Cooperation," Morrison replied. "Free elections. An end to the restrictions that have prevented your people from reaching their full potential. The chance to join something greater than the stagnant system you've been trapped in. And if we refuse, then you'll remain under Dominion protection until your people are ready to make that choice for themselves," Morrison said. "We're not interested in conquest, Governor. We're interested in liberation. But one way or another, the old system ends today." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Zethkara looked around at the Dominion officers present, seeing the same calm confidence in all their faces. They weren't celebrating a military victory. To them, this was simply the inevitable result of superior preparation and technology. 8 systems, Zethkara said numbly. "You've attacked 8 Council systems." "We've liberated 8 Council systems," Chen corrected. "And we're just getting started." The display shifted to show a strategic map of Council space. Red markers indicated systems under Dominion control, and there were far more of them than 8. As Zethkara watched, more markers appeared in real time as additional systems fell to Dominion forces. Simultaneous operations across 47 systems, Chen explained. Every major defense network, every strategic installation, every symbol of Council authority, all being neutralized as we speak. "This is impossible," Zethkara protested. "The coordination required, the resources, the sheer number of ships. We've had 2 centuries to prepare," Chen reminded him. 2 centuries to build ships, train crews, develop strategies. 2 centuries to plan for this exact moment. But why now? Why not wait longer, build more ships? Chen's expression grew somber. "Because we've run out of time. Our intelligence networks have been tracking the Council situation for decades. The stagnation, the growing discontent, the internal tensions. Galactic civilization is approaching a collapse point, and if we waited much longer, there might not be anything left to save." He activated another display, this one showing economic projections for Council space. The trends were disturbing: declining productivity, increasing unemployment, growing wealth inequality, and rising social unrest across dozens of worlds. "The Council's system is dying," Chen continued. "Has been dying for centuries. The careful balance between species, the restrictions on technological development, the fear of change, it's all created a society that can't adapt to new challenges. We've given them stability, but at the cost of progress. So you decided to tear it all down?" "We decided to offer something better," Chen corrected. "The operations you're seeing aren't about destroying the Council. They're about removing the obstacles that prevent change from happening naturally. As if summoned by his words, a new transmission came through the tactical center. This time, it was from the Council homeworld itself, from High Counselor Veltar. To whoever is responsible for these attacks, Veltar began, his voice tight with controlled fury. The Council demands immediate cessation of hostilities. We are prepared to negotiate, but only after your forces withdraw from Council territory. Chun smiled and opened a channel. High Counselor, he said, this is Admiral Chun of the Terran Dominion. I'm afraid withdrawal is not an option. The liberation of Council space has begun, and it will continue until every being in the galaxy has the freedom to choose their own destiny. Liberation? Veltar's image flickered with outrage. You call unprovoked attacks on peaceful systems liberation? I call it the end of a quarantine that should never have existed in the first place, Chin replied. For 2 centuries, you kept us isolated because we dared to suggest that your way wasn't the only way. Now you're going to discover what we learned in that isolation. What do you want? Veltar asked, echoing Governor Thexmar's earlier question. Free elections in every council system, Chun replied without hesitation. An end to the restrictions on technological development. The dissolution of the species-based hierarchy that has prevented true cooperation. And, most importantly, the chance for every being in the galaxy to decide for themselves what kind of future they want to live in. Impossible, Veltar replied. The council system exists to maintain order, to prevent the chaos that would result from unrestricted competition between species. The council system exists to maintain the power of those who created it, Chun corrected. But that system is ending, High Counselor. The only question is whether it ends through negotiation or through continued demonstration of our capabilities. As if to emphasize his point, new markers appeared on the strategic display. More systems falling under Dominion control. More defense networks neutralized. More symbols of council authority being systematically dismantled. You can't possibly maintain control over so many systems, Veltar protested. Your forces will be spread too thin. Your logistics will collapse. Resistance movements will what? Chun interrupted. Will fight against the forces that are offering them freedom, opportunity, and unlimited potential for growth. High Counselor, you're thinking like someone who still believes in the old paradigms. You're assuming that control requires oppression, that order requires limitations, that cooperation requires hierarchy. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Chun replied. I'm demonstrating an alternative. Watch the reports from the systems we've liberated. See how quickly their populations adapt to new possibilities when the artificial restrictions are removed. Observe what happens when beings are free to pursue their full potential instead of being confined to predetermined roles. The transmission ended with Veltar staring at Chun in a mixture of fear and confusion. The High Counselor had built his entire career on the assumption that the Council's way was not just the best way, but the only way to maintain galactic civilization. Now he was being confronted with evidence that those assumptions were wrong. What happens next? Zefkera asked as the command center returned to its normal operations. Now we wait, Chun replied. We've made our point. The Council can no longer pretend that their authority is unquestionable or their systems are invulnerable. They have to decide whether they want to be part of the solution or an obstacle to be removed. And if they choose to be an obstacle, Chin's smile was cold. Then they'll discover that Exile taught us far more than just how to build ships and weapons. It taught us that sometimes to save something, you have to be willing to destroy the parts that are holding it back. As Zefkera was escorted back to his quarters, he couldn't escape the feeling that he had just witnessed the beginning of the end of galactic civilization as he knew it. The Dominion's demonstration of power had been overwhelming, but more troubling was their demonstration of purpose. They weren't conquerors seeking to replace one empire with another. They were revolutionaries seeking to tear down the entire system and replace it with something fundamentally different, something that might be better or might be catastrophically worse. The only certainty was that the galaxy would never be the same again. And in the depths of space, More Dominion ships continued their systematic dismantling of the old order, each victory bringing them closer to a future that no one could predict. The call came at dawn on Proxima B, ship time. Commander Zethkara had been aboard Dominion vessels for 6 days now, watching as report after report confirmed the systematic collapse of Council authority across the galaxy. 47 systems under Dominion control. Defense networks neutralized. Governments either cooperating or under protective custody. And now, as he sat in what had become his regular briefing room, Admiral Chun was offering him something he hadn't expected. A choice, Chun said simply. The same choice we're offering every being in the galaxy. Zethkara studied the Admiral's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What he found instead was something that might have been weariness. For all their technological superiority and military success, the Dominion's leadership didn't seem to be taking pleasure in their victory. What kind of choice? Return to the Council, Chun replied. Take our message to the High Counselor and the species representatives. Help them understand that cooperation will benefit everyone, while continued resistance will only prolong the inevitable. And if I choose not to be your messenger, then you remain our guest until the transformation is complete, Chun said. Your crew will be well treated, your ship will be maintained, and you'll have a front row seat to watch the birth of a new galactic civilization. Zethkara looked out the viewport at the bustling activity below. Proxima B had become the center of a vast coordinating effort, with ships arriving and departing constantly as the Dominion managed their ongoing operations across dozens of systems. The efficiency was remarkable, but what struck him most was the diversity of the crews. Humans worked alongside cetaceans, Andromedans, and dozens of species he didn't recognize. Many showed the enhanced features that seemed common among Dominion citizens, but there were also clearly unmodified members of various species, recent additions to their society. The refugees, he said, remembering Commander Torres' earlier explanation. You've been taking in refugees for decades, building support among populations that the Council had abandoned or failed to protect. Chun nodded. Every species that the Council declared incompatible with galactic civilization. Every group that asked inconvenient questions or challenged established hierarchies. Every individual who sought opportunities that the existing system couldn't provide. He paused. Did you know that over the past century, more than 50 million beings have found their way to Dominion space? The number was staggering. 50 million refugees, defectors, and exiles, all absorbed into Dominion society and apparently thriving there. No wonder their population had grown so rapidly. How did they get through the quarantine? The same way information gets through any barrier, Chun replied. Slowly, carefully, and with the help of those who believe in something better than what they're leaving behind. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Chun activated the display, revealing the face of High Counselor Veltar. The leader of the Council looked haggard, older than in their previous communication, as if the weight of the crisis was taking a physical toll. Admiral Chun, Veltar began. The Council is prepared to negotiate. Excellent, Chun replied. What are you prepared to offer? Gradual reforms, Veltar said carefully. Increased representation for younger species, relaxation of some technological restrictions, expanded trade opportunities, inadequate, Chun interrupted. High Counselor, you're offering to rearrange the deck chairs while the ship is sinking. What we need is fundamental change, not cosmetic adjustments to a failed system. Veltar's expression hardened. The Council system has maintained peace for over 10,000 years. Your fundamental changes could destroy everything we've built. What you've built is already destroying itself, Chun countered. Your own reports document the problems. Economic stagnation, social unrest, declining innovation, growing dissatisfaction among younger generations. The only thing your system has maintained is the illusion of stability while the foundations rot away. Chun activated a series of displays showing data from across Council space. Economic indicators, population trends, technological development rates, satisfaction surveys, all showing long-term decline masked by short-term stability measures. This is what your careful balance has created, Chun continued. A galaxy-spanning civilization that has lost the ability to adapt, to grow, to meet new challenges. You've achieved perfect order at the cost of everything that makes life worth living. And your alternative is chaos, Veltar shot back. Unrestricted competition, technological development without oversight, the breakdown of the systems that prevent interspecies conflict. Our alternative is freedom, Chen replied. The freedom to pursue your full potential regardless of which species you were born into. The freedom to develop technologies that solve problems instead of preserving power structures. The freedom to choose your own destiny instead of accepting the role assigned to you by others. Zethkara found himself leaning forward, caught up in the debate despite himself. Both sides were presenting compelling arguments, but Chen's words carried the weight of demonstrated success. Whatever the Dominion had built in their exile, it clearly worked. Show him, Chun said to someone off-screen. Show the High Counselor what we've accomplished. The display split, showing scenes from across Dominion space. Cities where multiple species lived and worked together in apparent harmony. Research facilities where beings collaborated on projects that seemed to push the boundaries of known science. Educational centers where young people learned without the restrictions that characterize council institutions. But most striking were the faces. Everywhere in the Dominion recordings, beings appeared confident, purposeful, engaged with their work and their lives in ways that Zethkara rarely saw in council space. This is what your exile created, Chen explained. Not the broken, vengeful survivors you expected, but a society that has learned to value diversity, encourage innovation, and provide opportunities for every individual to contribute to something greater than themselves. Veltar studied the images with obvious skepticism. Propaganda, he said finally. Carefully selected scenes designed to support your narrative. Then, send observers, Chun suggested. Send representatives from every council species to see for themselves what we've built. Let them tour our cities, examine our technologies, speak with our citizens. Judge for yourself whether this is propaganda or reality. And if they're impressed by what they see, then they'll return to their home systems with evidence that there's a better way to organize galactic civilization, Chen replied. They'll be able to show their people what's possible when artificial limitations are removed. And if they're not impressed, Chen's smile was grim. Then they'll return with evidence of our capabilities, and their people will have to decide whether they want to join us voluntarily or wait for us to liberate them. The transmission paused as Veltar consulted with advisors off-screen. Zethkara could see the debate raging in the High Counselor's expression, the desire to maintain the old system warring with the growing realization that the old system might no longer be viable. What guarantees can you provide? Veltar asked finally. How do we know that your liberation won't simply replace council authority with Dominion authority? Because authority, as you understand it, is exactly what we're trying to eliminate, Chen replied. The Dominion doesn't rule its members. It provides the framework within which they can rule themselves. Every world, every system, every community has the autonomy to organize itself according to its own values and priorities. That's impossible, Veltar protested. Without central authority, there's no way to coordinate policy, resolve disputes, maintain standards. There's no way to maintain control, Chun corrected. Which is exactly the point. We've learned that the most effective coordination comes from voluntary cooperation between autonomous partners, not from imposed hierarchy. Chen activated another display, this one showing the administrative structure of Dominion space. Instead of the complex bureaucracy that characterized the Council, there was a surprisingly simple network of autonomous regions connected by voluntary agreements and shared infrastructure. Each world governs itself, Chen explained. Each system manages its own affairs. The Dominion provides common defense, shared technology, and coordination for large-scale projects, but local decisions remain local. And when conflict arises, they're resolved through negotiation, mediation, or in extreme cases, separation, Chen replied. What we don't do is impose solutions from above or maintain unity through force. Veltar was quiet for a long moment, studying the organizational charts and policy documents that Chun had shared. This is a completely different conception of governance, he said finally. Yes, Chen agreed. It's based on trust instead of control, on voluntary cooperation instead of imposed hierarchy, on the assumption that intelligent beings can manage their own affairs if given the tools and freedom to do so. And if you're wrong? If this leads to chaos, conflict, the breakdown of interstellar civilization, then we'll adapt, Chen replied simply. We'll learn from our mistakes, modify our approach, and keep trying until we find something that works better. What we won't do is cling to a failed system because we're afraid of change. The conversation continued for another hour, covering economic policies, technological development, defense arrangements, and dozens of other details. Throughout it all, Zethkara found himself increasingly convinced that the Dominion represented something genuinely different from anything he had encountered before. They weren't offering to replace one empire with another. They were proposing to eliminate empire altogether, to create a galactic civilization based on voluntary association rather than imposed authority. It was either the most revolutionary political development in galactic history or the most elaborate deception ever attempted. When the transmission finally ended, Chun turned to Zethkara with an expression that seemed almost sympathetic. I know what you're thinking, the Admiral said. It seems too good to be true. A society without oppression, a galaxy without artificial limitations, a future where every being can reach their full potential. It does seem unlikely, Zethkara admitted. So did human spaceflight, once upon a time, Chen replied. So did faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, interstellar civilization itself. The Council has trained you to think in terms of limitations, to accept that certain things are impossible. But Exile taught us something different. What? That impossible is just another word for not yet attempted, Chen said. We've had 2 centuries to attempt the impossible, Commander. And we've discovered that most limitations exist in the mind, not in reality. Chun stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the bustling activity of Proxima B. The choice I'm offering you isn't just about whether to carry our message back to the Council. It's about whether to be part of building something new or defending something that's already dead. The Council system isn't dead, Zethkara protested. Flawed, perhaps, but not dead. Look at the data, Chen replied, reactivating the displays showing Council space. Declining birth rates, increasing immigration, growing dissatisfaction among younger generations, economic stagnation, technological stagnation, political paralysis. These aren't the signs of a healthy civilization. Zethkara studied the information, seeing patterns he had noticed before, but never connected. The Council was managing decline, not promoting growth. They were maintaining stability by preventing change, not by creating conditions for sustainable progress. What happens to the Council if I deliver your message? He asked. They get the chance to be part of the solution, Chen replied, to help guide the transformation instead of being swept away by it. The old system is ending, Commander. The only question is whether its leaders will help build what comes next or be remembered as obstacles to progress. And if they refuse? Chen's expression grew somber. Then, they'll discover that while we prefer cooperation, we're prepared for other alternatives. The liberation of the galaxy will continue, with or without the Council's approval. Zethkara looked around the room, at the displays showing Dominion ships across dozens of systems, at the evidence of technological capabilities that seemed almost magical, at the proof of a society that had achieved things the Council considered impossible. How do I know you're telling the truth? He asked finally. How do I know this isn't all an elaborate deception? Chun smiled and activated one final display. This one showed a simple transportation pad in the corner of the room. Because, Chun said, you're going to see it for yourself. Before you return to Council space, you're going to visit every world in Dominion territory. You're going to speak with our citizens, examine our systems, test our claims. When you deliver our message to the High Counselor, you'll be able to speak from personal experience about what we've built here." Zethkara felt a mix of anticipation and dread. If the Dominion was everything Chun claimed, then the galaxy was about to undergo the most fundamental transformation in its history. If they were deceiving him, then he was about to become the instrument of his own civilization's destruction. Either way, there was no turning back. "When do we begin?" he asked. Chen's smile broadened. "Immediately. Your education in the realities of post-exile civilization starts now." As they stepped onto the transportation pad, Zethkara couldn't help but wonder what he would find in the worlds they were about to visit. Would he discover a utopia that vindicated everything Chen claimed? Or would he uncover the darker truths behind the Dominion's impressive facade? The answer, he realized, would determine not just his own fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. The pad activated, and reality shimmered around them as they prepared to journey into the heart of the new order that Exile had created. Whatever he found there would shape his decision about which side of history he wanted to be on 3 weeks after his capture. Commander Zethkara stood on the bridge of his own ship again, surrounded by his original crew and staring at a tactical display that showed the transformed galaxy spread out before him. The Starweaver hung in space at the edge of Council territory, but the boundaries that had once seemed so permanent now appeared meaningless. Behind him, Admiral Chun waited patiently as Zethkara composed a message that would change everything. The tour of Dominion space had been exhaustive, overwhelming, and utterly convincing. Zethkara had visited 17 worlds, spoken with thousands of citizens, examined their technologies, observed their governments, and tested their claims about freedom and opportunity. What he had found defied every assumption he had held about how galactic civilization should work. On New Geneva, he had watched human children learning alongside young cetaceans and Andromedans, their education focused not on fitting into predetermined social roles, but on discovering and developing their unique capabilities. The schools had no standardized curricula, no species-based tracking, no limitations on what subjects could be explored. On Harmony Station, he had observed a planetary government made up of representatives from 12 different species, making decisions through consensus rather than hierarchy. Complex policy issues that would have taken the Council years to resolve were handled in days through direct negotiation between affected parties. On Prometheus Base, he had toured research facilities where scientists worked on projects that the Council would have banned as too dangerous or disruptive. Artificial intelligence that enhanced rather than replaced organic intelligence. Biotechnology that allowed individuals to adapt their physical forms to different environments. Energy systems that could provide unlimited power without environmental impact. Most shocking of all, it worked. Not perfectly. There were disagreements, conflicts, failures, and mistakes. But instead of paralysis, there was adaptation. Instead of stagnation, there was constant innovation. Instead of control through fear, there was cooperation through shared purpose. "Your thoughts, Commander?" Chen asked quietly. Zethkara turned to face the Admiral. "I understand now why you had to show me rather than simply tell me. If someone had described what you've built without letting me see it for myself, I would never have believed it was possible. And now I have to decide whether I'm going to help tear down everything I've served my entire life to build, or watch it collapse under the weight of its own contradictions." Chen's expression was sympathetic. "I know it's not an easy choice, but consider this. The system you served was already failing. We didn't cause the problems you saw in those Council reports. We're offering a solution." Zethkara activated the ship's communication system and began recording his message to the High Counselor. "High Counselor Veltar," he began, "this is Commander Zethkara, reporting from the edge of Council space. I have completed my investigation of the situation in the Proxima system, and I must inform you that everything we thought we knew about the exiled species was wrong." He paused, knowing that his next words would probably end his career and might end his life. "The Terran Dominion is not a threat to galactic civilization. It is an alternative to galactic civilization. And after extensive observation of their society, their technology, and their governing systems, I believe it is a superior alternative. Behind him, he could hear his crew shifting uncomfortably. Mordak cleared his throat as if to object, then fell silent. Yila's crystalline form flickered with distress. They knew as well as he did what such a statement meant. The Dominion has achieved technological capabilities that far exceed anything in Council space, Zethkara continued. They have created a society that provides opportunities for growth and development that our system cannot match. Most importantly, they have demonstrated that cooperation between species can be based on voluntary association rather than imposed hierarchy. He activated his personal datapad, displaying the evidence he had gathered during his tour of Dominion space. I'm transmitting complete documentation of everything I observed during my time in Dominion territory. Population statistics, technological assessments, governmental analyses, economic data, and recorded interviews with thousands of Dominion citizens from dozens of different species. I encourage the Council to review this information carefully before making any decisions about how to respond to Dominion overtures. The message continued for nearly an hour, as Zethkara detailed everything he had learned. The revolutionary technologies that had eliminated scarcity and opened new possibilities for expansion. The educational systems that developed individual potential rather than enforcing conformity. The economic structures that provided security without stifling innovation. The governmental frameworks that maintained cooperation without requiring submission. In conclusion, Zethkara said, I believe the Council faces a choice that will determine the future of galactic civilization. We can attempt to preserve the existing system through military resistance, which will result in devastating losses and inevitable defeat given the Dominion's technological superiority. We can negotiate for gradual reforms while maintaining the basic structures of Council authority, which will simply delay the inevitable while providing no real solutions to our underlying problems. He looked directly into the recording device, knowing that his words would be studied by every leader in Council space. Or we can acknowledge that the Dominion represents a genuine opportunity for positive change, and work with them to transform galactic civilization into something that serves the needs and aspirations of all its citizens rather than just its rulers. The recording ended, and Zethkara transmitted it along with terabytes of supporting documentation toward the Council homeworld. Within hours, his message would reach the highest levels of galactic government, and the real test of Dominion principles would begin. What happens now, he asked Chen. Now we wait, the Admiral replied. We've demonstrated our capabilities, presented our proposals, and provided evidence of our achievements. The Council will have to decide whether they want to be part of building the future or defending the past. A communication alert indicated an incoming transmission from Council space. The response had come faster than Zethkara had expected, which probably wasn't a good sign. The display activated to show High Counselor Veltar, flanked by representatives from a dozen different species. His expression was grim, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of collective authority. Commander Zethkara, Veltar began, the Council has reviewed your initial report and finds your conclusions concerning. You appear to have been subjected to sophisticated psychological manipulation during your captivity. Zethkara felt his stomach drop. They weren't going to consider the evidence. They weren't going to evaluate Dominion proposals. They were going to dismiss everything as enemy propaganda. Your commission is hereby revoked, Veltar continued. You and your crew are ordered to return to Council space immediately for debriefing and evaluation. Any further communication with Dominion forces will be considered an act of treason. High Counselor, Zethkara began, I understand your concerns, but the matter is not open for debate, Veltar interrupted. The Council has made its decision. The Dominions,